Hi guys, welcome to another BigLipz podcast. As always, my name is Catherine Reese. With me is my good friend Sam Macaulay Blair. Um, and yeah, basically, as always, we are two kind of former and current film students. Um, and we are meeting up this week. Obviously, we're in our TV kind of series, season 2. This is episode 7, so we are meeting up today to talk about a genre that we haven't really spoken about in depth, either in TV or film, to either of our knowledge, the best of our memory. And that is a comedy. So basically, this week we are, for our content podcast, we are going to be talking about Derry Girls. As I say, this is obviously like a Channel 4 comedy. It's pretty relevant just now because the third and final season's coming out kind of as we speak, so we're both caught up on that. So unless you're caught up, unless you aren't caught up, sorry, there won't be any spoilers. So yeah, Sam, let's just dive right in. What were because you hadn't seen any of it before I had suggested it for the podcast. So what were your kind of initial and then overall thoughts?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it. It was something that like I'd been aware of. I actually don't know how long for. I can't think of like when the first time I heard mention of the show was. But it's obviously been in conversation a lot more recently because, like you said, the third and final season is like airing. And when you mentioned it, like I think I'd considered watching it before, like as in like just a flicker of a thought. But in my head, I just assumed there was like hundreds of episodes. I mean, I knew it was a British show, so there wasn't. I didn't think there was going to be like actually hundreds of episodes. But I assumed that there would be like fairly like meaty seasons. And yeah, I was really surprised to find out that it's only like 3 series of like 20-minute episodes.
Yeah, of like 5 episodes or something, 5 or 6
Yeah,
episodes.
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so I went in and I went in with I'd say high expectations because again I've only really heard good things about it. Uh, I also like I love Ireland. I find I know like living in Liverpool. There's obviously a sort of big Irish population here, so I like work with a lot of Irish people. I'm friends with a lot of Irish people, and all of them are generally like hilarious.
Yeah.
So again, like I just think they have a really good sense of humor. I think they just are like a really sort of funny people. So yeah, I went in like with high expectations, and I think initially I had like I think there are some like flaws with the show. Like it's not perfect, but at the same time, like I absolutely loved it. And I think like it started off strong, and it's like pretty much only got stronger as it's
Yep.
gone on. And yeah, it keeps on like surpassing itself, which is genuinely impressive. So yeah, it's like gone from not seeing any Derry Girls to being caught up within like the span of like a week or two, and
Yeah.
it's been a really good week or two. So yeah, no, had a great time. What about
Yeah.
you, Catherine? What's your history of the show?
So similar to you, I had like heard of it, and I remember people speaking about it when the first season was out. And I couldn't even tell you specifically who I was speaking to about it, but I do remember it being mentioned a lot and people saying, "Oh, it's really good, it's really funny, you should watch it." So I watched the first season not long after it came out, and like binge watched it, like watched one, and then I was like, "No, I need to watch all of this," and I was really disappointed when the first season ended because that was like season 2 hadn't come out or anything yet. And I loved it then. I thought it was so funny, and I would always just kind of like it kind of like slipped off the radar a wee bit because I feel like it's not massively advertised. I mean, I don't watch.
Yeah.
I don't think I think you're the same. I don't generally watch like kind of live TV with adverts and things like that, so I don't see a lot of adverts basically. But yeah, so it had kind of fallen off the radar. I hadn't really thought about it too much, other than thinking back to be like, God, that was really funny. Maybe I'll watch that again. And then I think it was people at work were talking about season 3 coming out, and that's when I thought, oh, I'm gonna need to get back on that because I hadn't even seen season 2.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so similar to you, I binge watched season 1 and 2 in like a week, like 5 days.
My God.
And it was just so good. It's like, and especially now with the new season out, it's one of the few shows that I watch like weekly, like episodically, because like we've spoken about before, kind of the way you watch TV's changed. And I think that's probably the only show that I actively, like, I'm waiting for the next episode to come out and I watch it as it comes out. Which I think is a testament to how good it is. Especially in this kind of day and age when we just binge watch shows all the time. And like, I don't know about you, but sometimes if there's a new show out and it's released, if the episodes are released weekly, I get like almost raging because I'm like, why would anyone do that? Why would anyone sit and wait every week for a TV show?
Yeah.
But yeah, Derry Girls is one of the ones that I would wait for. But no, I'm glad you found it funny as well. I think there's always that fear when, especially comedy, because comedy can be quite subjective. So there's always the fear that you suggest something and say, "Oh, it's really funny," and then people watch it and they're like, "Didn't get it. It wasn't for me."
Yeah.
So what? Do you have any like you were saying, it's kind of gone from strength to strength, which I would agree with. But do you have any favourite seasons or favourite episodes or even just like specific little bits that you found really, really funny?
I think, I genuinely think like I think every season's got better. So I think I'd rank them like in reverse order, effectively, so 3, 2, 1. And that's not to do any of it a disservice because it's all great. But I just think like, yeah, it just gets more sort of witty and imaginative, and the cast get more sort of comfortable, and the writing kind of gets stronger. It just continues to kind of like improve in the best way. But again, like the bar was already like in a really high place, so that's like the opposite of a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like there's again, I think there's like stronger episodes and there's weaker episodes. But even the weaker episodes, like you don't have a bad time at all. You know.
Yeah.
It's just there's like ones that you absolutely love, and then I think there's ones where you're like, that was really, really good, but like it's not just quite at the same level.
Yeah.
I really liked I guess like was it the season 2 episode, what's it called, The Curse, the one with the the funeral, or not the funeral, the sort of wake, and the scones, and yeah, just that was absolutely.
Oh, and then they like clog the toilet with all the scones. Oh,
yeah. And it
so
pays off.
funny.
The ending as well is so good with the family all tucking into the scones at the end, like after everything. So yeah,
I love
like
that bit as well because Erin's dad is like, because she like tries to lie her way through it, being like, "Oh, it was me that clogged the toilet," and then he said like, "Why did you invite all of your friends in?" And she was like, "It was a tense situation, Dad."
Yeah, exactly. It's so good.
One of my favourite bits, from that episode as
fine.
well, was when they were kind of all standing round the coffin. And obviously they're all Catholic, so it was a wake, so the body was in the house. And James, the English guy, was like, "Can no one see the dead body in the middle of the room?" And everyone was like, and I think it was Michelle and it was like, "Yes, James, it's a wake." Like, what did you expect?
Yeah. No, that was brilliant. Yeah, that's the part. Yeah, he says he's never seen a dead body before. Yeah, and even like the parents trying to like rob the earrings off the body as well. It's so good at just like building on sort of like jokes and yeah, doing it in a sort of surprising, like satisfying way. Like another really good one, I guess, to wind back. I think the first episode is absolutely terrific. Like I think it's like pretty much a perfect like pilot to the whole thing. I think it does such a good job. There's like points where you can kind of feel that it's a pilot episode, and it's you know, its job is to like set the sort of ground, like to sort of set the scene and like lay the groundwork and introduce all the characters, because like I think there's that bit towards the end where like all the parents come in like one at a time and all get like a line to basically introduce themselves, but at the same time like it's not badly done at all. It's just you know, it's just like, especially being people that like study and make films, these things do like kind of show up as more obvious, but it does a really good job of actually telling like a really funny sort of story narrative and like introducing you to the setting and the characters. So that was, again, like the first episode I think was another standout. Another one that I really liked was the most recent, no, is it the most recent one? The second most recent one, sorry, I watched them both today.
Same.
The second most recent one, The Haunting, I
Oh.
thought was excellent.
That was very funny.
Yeah, That was terrific. The one before it, actually, I'm going to just end up saying every episode, but the one before it as well, Stranger on a Train.
That one was very funny.
Was a perfect depiction of like that really awkward situation where you just pretend to remember someone.
And I feel like that's such like an inherently kind of like kind of British type thing where you out of politeness you would just, do you know that way, like you've seen yourself do it before where, oh yeah, how are you, yeah, how are you getting on, and then when they leave you're like, I have absolutely no idea who that was.
Yeah.
But and then her just keep coming back and knowing every single detail of their lives was just, like you were saying, it's just so well written.
Yeah, and I think one thing that third season in particular has done a really good job of, especially like with those 2 episodes, is you have like 2 storylines running. You know, one with like the sort of the kids and one with the parents, and it does a really good job of like blending the 2, like actually having them both like sort of interweave and pay off. You know, with like the Stranger in the Train one, obviously comes down to like the payoff is obviously the person whose bag it is the woman they're talking to. And then with the haunting, I like the fact that, you know, like they've gone off to they're convinced that they're being haunted, and at the same time you have like the parents going to like a seance and trying to like make contact with their mum, which I thought was like really well done, because they're 2 completely separate like storylines, but they are like very clearly linked, and it makes both of them, I think, work. Like it, you know, you could easily like, I think that's the thing, is like there are points, again, like I said, it's not a perfect show. I think there's like sometimes when like it maybe like stretches things a little bit too far in just like really small ways. Like I think in the Stranger in a Train episode, because obviously you have the character of Orla, who is very sort of like strange and zany in her own world, and I love her, like she's brilliant. But then you have like the not conductor, but the sort of shopping trolley guy on the train.
Yeah.
And they have their standoff.
Kit Kats.
yeah, exactly. And then they have their standoff, and he like points a banana at her, which is like, it's a funny moment, but it is one of those where I was like, this is maybe just like pushed it a little bit too far into. I can't imagine this ever happening.
It kind of went just that wee step too far into like silliness.
Yeah.
And in a way that, had the show been like that from the very outset and continuously like that, it would have been fine, but it did, I know what you mean, it felt a bit kind of like almost out of the blue.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you have like an actual like storyline where they're worried because there's cash and like a gun in someone's bag. It just feels like swinging very far the opposite way. But yeah, no, like I said, those moments are sort of like few and far between. I think that in The Haunting, because of the fact you have these like these 2 storylines that are like both almost like as absurd as each other, then you don't really like pay attention to how nuts they are. So I did very much enjoy that. And as well, like what is it, Sarah, and the sort of running joke in that episode with the World War II fighter pilot.
Oh
that's
God!
Like haunting
and
it.
she was like, "This guy won't give me a break."
Yeah.
That was
just,
very
like,
funny.
Shoos him away as well. It's just like such a brilliant, like, well done moment.
Yeah.
And it also does help you like buy into the supernatural like sort of premise. But I think as well, like series 3's done a really good job of like almost every episode has had like nice sort of emotional beats to go along with like the comedy. You know, like in the episode The Affair, where it does genuinely seem like their mother's having an affair, or Erin's mother's having an affair, and it is like handled really well in that moment where like you do really feel for the character. It's not like just played for laughs. You do get like the sort of sincerity out of it. And then again with like The Haunting, where you have like quite a few sort of emotional payoffs. You have like James and Erin, you have their stuff, and then you have like was it Grandfather Joe and
with the razor.
Exactly. So yeah, I think it's done a really good job there. And then probably possibly my favourite episode, or one of my favourite episodes, has got to be literally the most recent one, the reunion. Which was just, and it feels like there was like a sort of bittersweet note to it, because it felt like that was almost like a sub-series finale. Where it was, you know, because you do have this like sort of divergent cast of like half of them are like kids, half of them are adults, and they do a really good job of like using them all as much as possible, but it kind of feels like that was their finale. To kind of make way for like what they're going to do with like I don't know what they're going to do with like the kids, but it feels like they kind of want as much space to kind of like wrap that up. I could be wrong, but it just felt to me like that was their kind of like story that like paid off in a really like effective way. I've seen some like there's nothing actually been announced, and I don't think it would happen for like a while, but there's definitely like people clamoring for a spin-off.
I did. I was reading about that today. Yeah. But no, that's such a good point. It did definitely have that kind of finality feel to it, which is, I think, obviously, like you're saying, the kind of division works really well, and I think they, like the kind of adult cast deserve their own kind of like final moments as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, very good picks.
Okay, what about yours?
I think so I would 100% agree with you. I think it's just going from strength to strength. So I think season 3 would be my favourite so far. One of my absolute favourite episodes was the affair, and it was mainly like the talent show part was just hysterical, and the fact that they had like kept it under wraps. You didn't see them rehearsing the dance, and it was just when it came out and it revealed that they were the Spice Girls, and then obviously like you get so wrapped up in it being the Derry Girls that you kind of forget James is there, obviously. And he came out and he was Posh Spice, and it was just amazing. And I feel like during that dance as well, like Michelle, she was giving it her absolute all. Like that was she had prepped for that moment her whole life, and it was just so funny to watch. The other hilarious bit in that I loved, it was the that kind of like aggressive girl. She was singing that Meatloaf song.
Yeah.
And that super heavy Irish accent. Oh, so funny. I think another one I wanted to mention was, I think it's the last episode of series 2 when it looks like James is going to go away with his mum. And it's that kind of emotional beat that you were talking about, where genuinely there was a moment where I was watching and I was like, surely not. Surely he's not actually going to go away with his mum, who's just this horrible woman. So yeah, when he came back and he was shouting that he was a Derry girl, it made that just feel even nicer. Yeah. And it was nice for it to be like not because even when Michelle had her big moment where she was like, "Oh, you're a Derry girl, you have to stay here," kind of thing. There were like laughs in there, but it was like it was also sincere enough to make it not kind of like it. I just feel like it worked the way that it was done.
I agree.
I think there was a couple of very specific moments that I wanted to talk about. And it's mainly kind of like the family dynamics, which I think are done so well.
Yeah.
One of them is, I think it's the first season when the family like is sitting around for dinner, and then it's Mary, and she's confronting her dad about the cream horn incident, where such and such saw you buying a cream horn in the baker's, and everyone's horrified, like, what? That is not what. Who were you buying that for? And they're just so, like, their indignation is just hysterical to watch. Like, all he was doing was buying a wee cream horn for his new lady friend, and then the mum makes a comment about her mother's not even cold, and the dad's like, she's been dead for 10 years. What are you talking about? Just like that absolute, they've kind of like reverted into and like regressed to children again, where they're like, I can't believe you would do that to our mum, even though she's not there, she's been dead for 10 years.
I think because they offer her a biscuit, don't they? And it's a wagon wheel she takes, and there's a bit where they're like giving her grief, and she's just standing there holding this like huge wagon wheel in her hands. Yeah.
And then they make some comment about you'll never replace our mother, and she's like, okay, I wasn't planning on, but cool. So yeah, I think moments like that are absolutely hilarious. And there's one moment in particular when it comes out when she's like, oh, so the Mary's basically like listing all the things he got in the book of like 2 rolls and this and that and a cream horn, and everyone's shocked, and Erin turns around and she's like, that's not like you, Grandad. Like, I can't believe that. I just thought that was hilarious. Like, that's one moment that I still think is so funny. Yeah. And then another one, again, which was Erin, it was again the episode The Affair, when you know how at the beginning when everyone's like shouting at Mary and Orla's moaning that she doesn't like Pop-Tarts and blah blah blah, and it's all going a bit much, and you can hear Erin throughout it saying that she can't find her fountain pen. She's asking her mum for it, and her mum pulls a pen out of a drawer and gives it to her, and Erin is horrified, and she's like, "That's a biro." I just thought it was the funniest thing ever. Like, she was like, "Mum, how could you be so stupid?" I think moments like that are hilarious because you can kind of relate. Like, remember when you were a teenager and there was some things were just the most important thing in the world, and your mum just didn't ever understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they did a really good job actually of getting that, the capturing the sort of like essence of like just family dynamics and the mindset of like being that age and how everything is like the end of the world. And even just like the way that the parents and stuff interact with like the kids is like absolutely terrific and so spot on. Like that whole scene is a really like good depiction just of like the noise and the stress of like a busy household as well.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and I think as well like the payoff to that is so good where she just goes like she's like, I'm going to take a bath.
The boiler's broken.
It's just like we don't have any hot water.
So funny. So obviously kind of building on that, what would you obviously we both kind of studied TV and film and things like that, and I think you're currently studying comedy, so what do you think are the aspects of the show that make it so funny? Or like whether it's like script, we've kind of touched on each of them, but I'd want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's like just a sort of killer combination. The three main things it kind of comes down to are like you have like great writing, like a sort of like pitch perfect cast, and obviously it's edited really well. Like those are always kind of like the three big things where if you get the three of them right, then you're on to like sort of a winning formula, because I think you do, the writing, it has to be funny from the page ultimately, but then like the actors also do so much in terms of like the performance and the way they bounce off each other, that it goes a really long way to like actually making the jokes land. And then obviously the actual sort of rhythm and precision of like the humour, and because it's very sort of quick paced as well.
Yeah.
Like it just sort of like races from one joke to the next, and that absolutely contributes to it as well, because it's almost like it doesn't indulge in itself, I think. Is the thing that works about it, is it just like you get hit with the joke and then you're already on to the next one.
Hello again, apologies for the technical difficulties, not sure what happened there, but we will crack on. Sorry Sam, as you were saying, we were talking about what makes Derry Girls so funny. You were kind of talking about writing wise and script and the kind of pace of the show.
Yeah, well, I was talking about how you need to cut something appropriately, and then got cut off. I think you do need those three things to kind of work harmoniously, and I think like again the actors do have like terrific chemistry with each other. Yeah. And they all bring like so much to the roles, and I genuinely think like they are just like their delivery is just like so spot on. Yeah, it's just they're such a pleasure to watch all the time, and so much of what they say you could almost like predict, but it doesn't stop it from being like any less funny.
Yep.
And yeah, again, like just the sort of speed of the show I think is like a great asset, because it just like it always moves forward. What about you? What do you think are sort of strengths?
I think definitely like you're saying, script. I think it's very like you were saying, it feels very like authentic to like being a teenager and things like that, and you like I love when you think back about being a teenager and you just cringe because you were just so serious about everything, and everything was so like you were saying, if something didn't go your way, it was the end of the world. Like no one understood, your parents didn't understand, just things like that. I think it's so, and the script does that really well. Like it changes it from like teen angst into it being really funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you're saying, I think performance is a really big part of it, and I think like you're saying, they all work so well together. Even like in their little groups, so like there's the kind of Derry Girls, the young people, and then the kind of adults, but they mix well together as well. But yeah, I think the most important thing is like you were saying, the kind of pace and the speed in which they deliver those jokes. Like it doesn't hold your hand through the jokes. Like if you miss them, that's on you. You missed
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've definitely had to rewind it before because like a joke is like flown by and I've been like, oh, I missed that.
Yep, 100%. And sometimes like obviously they've got the Derry accent, which is very strong at points, and I feel like sometimes it's almost like your brain's just slightly behind because you're almost trying to translate what they're saying at times. Um, so I feel like in times like that is you do miss it, but I think that's kind of part of the fun is
Yeah.
trying to catch all the jokes and getting all the really funny bits. But yeah, kind of on a similar kind of note, I wanted to talk about obviously Derry Girls is set in Derry. It was written by a woman from Derry. Some of the actors are like Derry natives and things like that. How would you say this compares to other similar type of comedies? So I was thinking things like Still Game, where it's a similar format, a similar length, and it's very based in kind of Glasgow, and
Yeah.
it's a lot to do with that. That's where a lot of the humor comes from and things. So how do you think it compares? Do you think one's better than the other, or
I think it definitely does compare. Like I said, I absolutely get what you mean about like they are very like so sort of steeped in the local culture, and it's weird because obviously being from where Still Game is from versus like watching Derry Girls, which is
yeah,
like a completely different part of the United Kingdom. And I don't know. I would almost feel like Derry Girls is more accessible,
yeah,
and I don't know why I would say that. I'm not saying that Still Game's like super inaccessible, but I just feel like I don't know. I don't know if it's like the relatable sort of like teen drama aspect of it and sort of family stuff that makes it just like it translates a lot more. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question. And even more so because like I don't like Still Game at all.
whoa,
Yeah, I know.
controversial.
Yeah, I know. I know. I went to this school.
We're
very
gonna have to
across.
put a trigger warning on this video because I feel like that's gonna upset some people.
It absolutely is. Like I said, I've had it follow me all my life. But yeah, no, I genuinely like can't stand the show. And I've had so many
Wow.
friends for so long like try and get me to watch it and try and get me to enjoy it. And I've seen so much of the show, and I just like I don't know what it is. There's something about like, and I feel like if I were to ever appreciate the show, it would be having been removed from Scotland for a while.
Almost like a kind of listen nostalgic thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my sort of feelings on like Scotland and Glasgow in particular, generally like when I've gone back to visit, it's like been the times where I've enjoyed it the most. Whereas when I'm stuck there, a lot less so.
Fair.
And it's the same with like, so my mum bought me this book a couple of years ago called Shuggy Bane. Have you heard of it? Do you know anything about it?
No.
Written basically by like a Glaswegian guy. I think it's a guy, maybe a woman. A Glaswegian person, and it's basically the story of this like I think it's like sort of two stories running alongside each other. It's like the kid and then their mother, basically, and they're set in like different eras. So when the mum's set in like the 80s, whereas the kid is set like more sort of like contemporary, and it's there's a lot of like obviously the Scottish dialect, and it's written really well. There's some I think I remember. There was a really nice bit of description in one of the early pages where they described a bruise as tartan coloured, which I thought was lovely.
Yep.
But I could only read the first like few sort of chapters of it before I kind of had to like stop, and it's just so sort of relentlessly bleak, and it's very realistic. It's a very like honest depiction of like sort of like council estate living and stuff. And I think my issue is like that's just I'm very aware of like that's a big part of Glasgow, and
Yeah.
Still Game is very much that as well. And it genuinely like it just depresses me to no end. Like I don't find watching a show about like people pretending to be old people cutting about like a council estate in Glasgow. I just don't find it that like that to me. There's not much comedy in that premise. It's just like quite miserable.
Okay. Fair.
And as much as I am Scottish and like I think Scottish people can be hilarious. I don't know. I think this is suddenly becoming like very cultural.
Yeah, I know.
Derry Girls has led us astray.
I know. I'm sorry. You feel the need to like explain yourself.
No, I mean it's why the question's interesting. Because like I have such a different reaction to like each of these shows. But yeah, I just think I don't know what it is, but I also think like, you know, I know that a lot of like the sort of jokes and still game and stuff come from like the relatability. But I've just never really like it's just never really worked for me. Talking before, but obviously like comedy shows that just don't really, you know, it's very subjective and most of their jokes, you know, I remember like being with people and they're like, oh, but it's funny because that's what people would say, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm around people saying that stuff every day.
Yeah, I'm living it. It's not as funny when you.
Exactly. Like I don't need to sit down and watch a show to sort of repeat the jokes. So yeah, like I mean, it's not that I'm completely against like Scottish comedy. Lemmy it can be very hit and miss.
Yes,
but
I would agree with that. Yeah.
But that's just, I think that's partly because of like how out there he is. But he can also be hilarious. You know, there's definitely Lemmy sketches that I really enjoy. And then you have like Burniston's another one. I've not seen like tons of it, but I've watched like odd episodes, and I think some of their sketches are hilarious. But yeah, I think like for me the big one is like Still Game. I just don't really care for the very premise of the show. Is just like does nothing for me. Whereas Derry Girls, again, I think there's like a relatability, and I think it's nice watching something that is very, you know, it's very Irish. You know, uses the setting very well, and like even like setting it in like the 90s and stuff, it does kind of get the most out of its setting, and it does feel very, very Irish in like the best possible way. So I think I love that these shows exist. Like, you know, as much as I don't like Still Game, I don't wish it didn't exist. I just definitely have like an added dislike of it, because like my whole life has been people being convinced that they are finally going to be the person that like makes me find it funny.
To convert you. That's funny. I think you made such a good point there about Still Game being quite bleak, because I think Derry Girls could very, very easily have been like that, because it's obviously set during like the Troubles, but they make it, I don't want to say funny because that feels like it is like making light of it, but there's like, so they're, and I think it's the first episode, they're just like minorly inconvenienced that the bus has to go the long way because there's a bomb on the bridge. Like that's a very serious thing, but they're like, oh god, this is such a pain, we're gonna have to go the long way. And I'm sure the parents are annoyed as well, like, oh, how are the girls going to get to school? I think that's such a really interesting point that I never thought of, actually, where Derry Girls has the potential to be very bleak, but it kind of, and not in an insensitive way, but it makes the kind of situation they're in very funny, but it also has the moments where it's very like, so there was a moment at the end of one of the series when things were kind of coming to an end, and the parents were out in the street kind of celebrating with everyone. I think it does that really nicely, where it still kind of brings it back to different like cultural events and that, so like the Bill Clinton one as well.
Absolutely. Like I think they did a really good job of like making use of like the setting, the time periods, and like you say, I think the fact that it laughs, you know, it sort of finds the mundane. It's almost like it makes it really mundane in a lot of ways. Like again, with that first episode, the bomb on the bridge, and it just being like an inconvenience, and that is genuinely funny, because like that kind of is how people react. Like they do see it as like just like a minor inconvenience to them. Actually, you have just reminded me as well. Another absolutely brilliant moment is, I think is it the concert episodes when they're on the bus and Sister Michael comes on. And then Michelle doesn't want to own up to her bag, which is full of
and they blow up her suitcase full of booze.
It's just when it cuts to like the road and the bag sitting on it, and then the bomb diffuser robot coming over.
Very funny.
Yeah, so good. But yeah, sorry, as you were saying.
No, I think that was a really interesting point you made about Still Game. I always like though. I think it would be interesting. I don't know whether it's like you're saying, because Derry Girls feels a bit more accessible, whether like say English people or even American people would watch and enjoy it, because I always like to hear people's thoughts, like non-Scottish people's thoughts on Still Game, and apparently yours. No, just to like see whether they find it funny, whether they get the jokes or different things like that. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of like Americans people's perspective on Derry Girls and things like that is. But I don't know. Obviously, I don't know what Derry Girls' reach is at the moment. But
I don't. I think it's pretty big, to be fair.
yeah, they've got their own like mural
In Derry.
In Derry, yeah, which is pretty cool.
I know. I think it is. Yeah, I'd be curious as well. I don't actually know how like fares over in America. I imagine. I would think that it would kind of struggle, but then maybe not, because like as much as Irish accent can be quite thick, I feel like it's also one of the more like sort of travelled accents. Like you get, especially towards America, there's a lot of like Irish Americans, and so I would like to think, or I would assume that maybe there is a bit more of like there is a bit of familiarity with the accent, so they could kind of manage. Whereas I do feel like Still Game would be a lot more inaccessible.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in Manchester, I had friends that came down to visit, and there was a guy that was like I knew who was friends with. He was drinking with us one night. We were in my flat, and they stuck on, I think, an episode of Still Game to try and like indoctrinate him. And I think he just like got like 5 minutes in and just like stopped watching the episode, basically, because he was just like he was like, I don't know anything that these people are saying.
That's amazing.
Like I think it was just like impenetrable for him. And it's the same with like I got a friend in Australia, and she absolutely loves Lemmy's show, but she did say, she was like, I have to watch like every like sort of bit like over and over again until I can figure out what he's actually saying.
That's amazing. I remember I had a lecturer. We for one of my modules watched the movie Ned's, which is a very Scottish movie, and this woman was from Belgium. And she had to watch it in subtitles because she was like, I had absolutely no idea what they were saying. Even like, if you think, I don't particularly think my accent's strong, reasonably articulate, I would say.
Yeah.
But even like when I go to America, people can't understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's bizarre. They must, so they probably couldn't even watch things like Still Game or Lemmy or anything like that. They just wouldn't.
I think it comes down to like, I guess like the way that I think it's because like when you listen to people talk, whether you mean to or not, I think you're always kind of, your brain is always trying to not just like listen to what they say, but also figure out what they're going to say. Like I think there's always like an element of like predictive text that goes on in our head where we're trying to like we your brain likes taking shortcuts, and I think it tries to do that with people talking as well, where it just it assumes the end of like conversations, and I think like I guess it's also like the way that you phrase words, the places that you put emphasis and stuff completely changes from like with like Scotland and Ireland and England, different parts of England and stuff like that. So I think it makes it the way that you will like maybe elongate a word or shorten a word, and just like I guess like two words can be the same and you could hear them the same, but if you've never really heard someone in a particular accent speaking, then you have no idea like what it is that they're saying. Because I get people down here who like don't know what I'm saying at points, which again is nuts because like we're like a stone's throw away.
In fairness, I've spoken to people on the phone at previous works who have been from Aberdeen, and I just have had no clue what they're saying. Like my current work, we speak a lot to people like up north, like Inverness, Forest Way, and there's just one particular guy, and I genuinely cannot understand what he's saying. And we're both Scottish, we're both speaking the same language, and I just have no clue.
Exactly. That's it. And again, like it's interesting because again, like you're well spoken, and I think I'm fairly well spoken. But it's just like people do struggle, and if they can't understand us when we're trying, then there isn't really much hope. And it's nothing against them. Again, it's just like if you're not familiar with an accent, then there's nothing you can really do about that except like spend the time. But like it's probably harder to do that with a TV show unless you use subtitles than it would be with like actual people, because I think you probably get more from like being around people and actually like hearing them talk. Since we're talking about like the cultural shows thing, one thing that kind of came to mind is, would you say that like the In-Betweeners is like the English equivalent of these shows?
Good shout. Do you know what? Do you know what actually sprung to my mind while I was writing my notes? Skins, because I feel like it's a very exaggerated. Well, I feel like it's can at times be quite exaggerated, but it's very much a very specific culture in England. So like young people like to go out drinking, doing drugs and stuff like that. Like these things go on, and these people are similar to real people, but yeah, Skins was definitely another one I thought of. But the In-Betweeners is a good shout because I remember they tried to make, I think we've spoken about it before, they've tried to make an American In-Betweeners and it was just god awful because it just didn't translate.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Yeah, I guess that kind of does prove, although it's, because I guess it's, like, I don't know if that proves or disproves it, because like you wouldn't ever be able to do an American Derry Girls or an American Still Game.
Yeah.
But I guess that's interesting.
It's interesting because you think about even like shows, American shows, comedy shows, like 20-minute type things, they're pretty similar. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously we've got like Still Game and Derry Girls and In-Betweeners and things like that, and they're all very different. But they're all the same kind of format, and they're all the same genre. So yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Whose do you think is the best? Ireland.
What, in terms of like the UK?
Yeah. In terms of like the three that we mentioned, we need to think of a Welsh one.
I know. Well, I was thinking that. I was like, is there a
Welsh?
Yeah, I think it is Welsh. I've not seen Gavin and Stacey.
I haven't seen it either.
To watch. Join us next time for Gavin and Stacey. Yeah, no, Gavin and Stacey probably is one actually. I'll need to check it out because I do love the Welsh. It's difficult for me to answer that because I like watched the In-Betweeners when I was in school and when it was kind of coming out.
When it was peak.
Yeah,
funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't really gone back to it since. So I'd probably have to revisit it to like properly answer that. But I feel like in terms of like first viewing of these things, In-Betweeners landed a lot more just because it was like very, very relevant. And it was, again, just like that whole culture of like being in school and everyone like referencing it all the time and things. It was very much like a big like cultural sort of like.
Do you remember you couldn't
show.
Stand at a bus stop without people driving by and shouting at you?
I mean, to an extent, you still kind of can.
That's true. Yeah.
That still persists. So I would say probably the In-Betweeners, purely for the fact that like nostalgia reasons and like the importance of it, like, or the significance of it, the relevancy of it. But I am absolutely loving Derry Girls, and it is close. And Derry Girls hasn't finished yet. So like it's still possible that it could take the lead. But what about yourself?
I don't know. I would probably have to agree with you. I think I'm first thinking I would have gone Derry Girls. Excuse me, but then you were talking when you were talking about the In-Betweeners there, it did make sense. Like that came out at the perfect time for us because we were still at school and we went to school with people like Jay, maybe not quite as exaggerated, but do you know what I mean? Well, but yeah, no, I think Derry Girls. Do you know how many episodes it's gonna have? I read somewhere that they're having like a special extended episode to end it. I'm sure.
Yeah, I read that today. I've kind of avoided like reading anything about it just because like I've not been caught up. And then after I finished the most recent episode, I was like, I can actually Google Derry Girls.
Yeah.
So I read like 8 articles on it. And yeah, I think it almost sounds like, I don't know if like it's like a sort of finale and then a coda or like a sort of, I don't know, because I read one thing about the very last episodes, which I won't mention just because I kind of wish I hadn't read it, but it almost implies that there's going to be like and the way that the article was phrased that mentioned the episode, it was almost like, oh, it's an additional thing. So I don't know if like the next one's going to be the finale and then it's like a sort of like epilogue but like a longer one,
right.
Or if like maybe the next episode's the last like true episode and then we have like an actual finale, an episode that is just designed to be the finale. Kind of like the In-Betweeners had like their In-Betweeners movie, which like wrapped everything up.
And then
so I'm not sure.
In-Betweeners movie.
Yeah, which yeah.
Yeah, the said about that the better.
Exactly, but yeah, no, I think it's I don't really know the full details of it, but it is meant to be I think 45 minutes, which is very exciting because I feel like even though it's not that like long a show and it's not like there's all these like lingering questions and stuff. It still feels like there's a lot that they need to and probably would wrap up and pay off and stuff.
Yeah. Just skipping ahead in our notes quickly, just to kind of tie it in. Are you glad that it's ending in like in the way that we've spoken about TV shows that just endlessly go on and on and on? Grey's Anatomy always springs to mind. It's on season like 145 or something. But are you? What are your thoughts? Are you glad that it's ending? Do you think it's coming to a natural end?
I mean, I would love to see it go on a bit longer.
Yeah.
It does feel like there's a lot more gas in the tank. Because again, like we've had 3 very sort of short series each, and they do a really good job of, even though the cast are like well outside the age that they're playing, but they do a really good job of like playing the age that they're playing and doing it convincingly. So I genuinely would be happy for it to keep going, but I think the key thing that I was sort of reading today is that like the creator and the stars and stuff has all said that like they feel like this is the place to end it. It's sort of the writer. It's all written by like the one person basically, which is obviously why there's so little of it. Which I appreciate the fact that it's just like her show, and it just is so consistent that way. But yeah, she basically said that. She felt like as a writer that this was like the place to end it, and she's I think quite happy with the way she's ended it. So in that sense, like I am sad to see it ending. Like I would love for there to be more of it, but I'd rather it end on its own terms and end on like a good note. I'd rather better to be left wanting more than to be watching like, as you say, like season 106 and going like, okay, I really wish like this had just stopped.
The Simpsons also springs to mind.
Exactly, and I do feel like the fact that The Simpsons is still going on, I think it actually, you would think, oh well, if you don't want to watch it, don't watch it, and I don't.
Yeah.
But I think it does diminish the impact of, and the sort of like, the impact of the actual show itself. Like I feel like The Simpsons would be held in conversation in a completely different way if it had ended when it was in its like peak, rather than like declining the way it did. Even if it had just ended maybe like 20 years ago. Like I feel like it could have just been. It genuinely would be revered, and it still is like one of the in its prime. It still is like one of the great shows. But I just feel like it's not really discussed as much that way because like it's so tainted by
100%. Yeah.
And now being like, and now more of it is bad than good, really. So overall, like you can't. The way that you talk about the quality of the show changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm sad to see it end, but I'm happy that it's ending this way. What about you?
I think similar to you, I think it's always preferable for a show to end on its own terms than to carry on endlessly or to be cancelled. I don't think, obviously at this stage, I don't think there would be a huge scope for it to be cancelled. But yeah, I think it's maybe kind of coming to a kind of natural end. You don't want to see them endlessly go through school and then go through maybe different unis and things like that, if that's what they chose to do. So yeah, I'm kind of happy in that sense. I feel like they'll wrap it up really well. But like you're saying, I think it's definitely will leave you wanting more. Like it is only like 6 20-minute episodes for 3 seasons. That's not a huge amount. But yeah, I think it'll definitely be. I think leaving it here will definitely, like you're saying, there's a lot more scope for it to maybe be studied. And like, just like in general, like studied in the way that obviously you're studying comedy and things like that. I think it would make a good kind of case study for things like that if it stays kind of like tight and concise, basically.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm sad. I will be sad as well when it finishes because it's just. I think it's quite rare in that it's so funny, like laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
And it's pretty constant.
That's a very good point. Like for the longest time, like until pretty much just now when I'm studying comedy, have generally avoided watching like comedy shows that much. Like there's very sort of few sitcoms that I've really seen heaps of. I think How I Met Your Mother is one of the only few that I've like watched all the way through, and obviously that is like a beast of a show. I think most of them. Most of the shows that I'd like have watched, and most of the sort of comedy shows that I've watched and enjoyed, I like have watched sort of with people. don't really like. I don't really. I always laugh more if I'm with other people than I do if I'm by myself. And like there's comedy shows that I love that I've watched by myself, and you just don't like.
Yeah, you're like staring at the screen completely deadpan, but inside you're like, haha, that was fun.
Exactly. Red Dwarf's another one, actually, a British show that again there's loads of it, and I've watched. I have a lot of love for the show, but even like watching it the first time, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a lot of like actual laughing out loud. But with, like you say, with Derry Girls, there has absolutely been like so many points where I am just like howling with laughter.
Yep.
And it is like an absolute testament to the show, because it is so like funny. So yeah, it's absolutely brilliant for that.
Going back, we've kind of touched on this, and obviously we spoke about it in terms of why it's so funny. In terms of like the cast, what were your thoughts? Like, kind of, obviously we've spoken about how well they work together. Do you think there's anything like? Obviously, one of the things that I really liked about it was that the girls plus James, were all like kind of unknown actors in that, and I feel like that worked so well for something like this, just because it just makes it feel a bit fresher. There was no expectations of like, oh, that girl's really funny, or do you know what I mean? And I remember reading somewhere that one of the girl that plays Orla, was like, had done the first season, and she was like still working in a pub because she had to, because she wasn't getting any money. Like,
brilliant.
So that's like that's the extent to which they were like unknown and things like that.
Yeah, proper fresh meat.
No,
I completely agree. Like, I think it was really nice to watch a show where you're not familiar with the actors, because like it adds a bit of unpredictability to the performances. You don't feel like, especially with comedy, like if you watch comedic actors in like comedies, different sort of comedy roles, then like for instance Ryan Reynolds right now is huge, and he's just being cast in like all these like sort of comedic roles, and he's just sort of playing the same character in all of them.
Yep, he's very much typecast.
Yeah, and every single one you watch gets less funny because like you're more familiar with like the types of things that he will say, the way that he will say them. So like as a result, it does diminish the comedy. You do kind of need surprise for comedy to work, and you get that with like these actors, where it does feel like, even though again like by like season 3 and stuff, I guess that's another reason that it's like good that it's ending when it is, because like it gets to stay funny to the end. You don't get like completely familiar with all the actors like rhythms and their deliveries. So, and like I said, there is still like a point now where like I feel like I know the characters, I know the actors, and you can almost predict certain jokes, but they're still brilliant. And again, the show I think is fast enough that you don't really get like a lot of time to kind of think ahead too much. But no, I think it is like cast to perfection. And I think like it's like, and again, like you say, it's almost impressive that even like the parents and stuff, I think the grandfather's the only actor that like I've recognised, and I'm not even sure I recognise him from.
He's in Game of Thrones.
That'll be it. Of course, yeah. Of course it's Game of Thrones.
Yep. No, yeah, I'd 100% agree. I think like we were saying, each of them brings their own kind of different style. They're all obviously slightly caricature-esque, but I think that's part of writing comedy, is that they need to be slightly exaggerated. No one's that funny in real life constantly, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would get very exhausting if they were. But yeah, on that kind of vein, do you have any favourite characters, or do you think it works better as the cast as a whole?
I mean, I think obviously the cast work tremendously well together, but yeah, I do have favourites. I think Michelle is my absolute favourite.
Michelle's my favourite as well.
She's so good, and again, she's just like so direct, sort of so blunt, and like again, she's probably like the most, like she's again so consistent, but just like hilarious every single time.
Yep.
And so much of her like lines are just her like ripping into James, and it's basically the same joke every time, but it's still always really funny.
Yeah, I loved in the haunting episode recently when they were all terrified that they were going to die, and James says something like, "Oh God, I can't believe I'm going to die a virgin," and Michelle's like, "That was always on the cards."
Also, when they're driving towards the border, and they get stopped by like the English soldier, and she just says, she's like, don't worry, we're not just taking him out. It's a
We're here
field
to
to kill
kill
him. Yeah. Yeah, no, she's brilliant. I think as well, like she is, I guess she drives a lot of the sort of story and a lot of like the sort of, like, you know, the episodic plots and stuff and just individual storylines, which I think I like. Like I would say, to go the other way, out of the group, out of the girls anyway, Claire is possibly my least favourite,
Yes.
and I still really like Claire. Like she can be hilarious, but so much of her is like opposition, whereas so much of Michelle is like momentum.
Yeah.
And I think that's just why it's like, you always kind of want Michelle to be leading things more. You almost want them to be like folding and listening to her, because it's going to be like everything's going to go disastrously, but
Yep.
it is going to be very funny.
Yep, I love it.
I also,
no, Michelle's definitely my favourite. Oh, sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, this was again when you mentioned like the cultural thing and thinking about in-betweeners and stuff. One thing that was actually quite refreshing, I thought anyway, for like watching the show was, you know, what you think about like the in-betweeners and stuff and the way that they handle things like teenage drinking, and obviously there is an element of like underage drinking and stuff, but they make a really big deal out of it in the show, like the fact that they're underage and they're drinking and they have to try and get booze, and again that's part of like the characters and stuff, and again like it trying to be relatable. But I love the fact that like just from like the get-go, Michelle just like drinks all the time, and it's just like, you know, there's just like
I love that she's always talking about trying to get a ride, and
yeah.
it's just hilarious.
Exactly.
And she's always like up for like, so she's always up for drinking. Obviously, I'm sure that episode was not her, and then in the flashback, kind of most recent episode, it was her mum that was like a kind of bad influence, like convincing the other mums to do whatever it was. And there's one point, the wake episode, where I'm sure it's Michelle that brings the kind of weed scones to the wake. It's, very funny.
She bakes them. She gets the recipe from her mum, doesn't she?
Yeah, I love it. She's like, I didn't know how to bake anything else.
Yeah, that itself is like such a good gag. The fact that it has to be scones and not brownies. Michelle is just absolutely like terrific. I also really like Orla. Again, like she is just very much in like her own sort of like world of her own. And sometimes she'll say something that doesn't, like, there'll be like moments with her that don't quite work, but I think again because of just like the weirdness of her, when she gets like a line that lands, it really lands. I think, what was it in? I think it may be the first episode of series 3, where they're discussing getting their exam results and like their parents' reaction, because they think obviously they failed, and they talk about having to like flee the country. And Orla just turns to James and she goes, actually, I will be needing my snorkel back. It was such a good moment.
Yeah, she's very serious, and like she knows exactly what she wants, and no one else understands why. Funnily enough, one of my favourite characters is Orla's mum.
That was exactly what I was going to say next.
Yeah, her lines and her delivery of her lines is absolute perfection.
That actress is so good.
See, when she's like, I love when like Jerry, Aaron's dad, is like he's so sarcastic that he's like, really, is that what she's got to worrying about? And I think her name's Aunt Sarah, and she turns around and she's like, yes, can you believe that? Like, I love the whole bit when she was obsessed with that woman's eyebrows. Like,
oh yeah.
And Michelle comes in and she's asking Michelle, like, how are her eyebrows looking? She's amazing. I think she's so funny. And she's like, her and her sister, Mary, they kind of play really well off each other, but I think she's like an unappreciated character in that, I would argue. Anyway.
Absolutely, like, yeah, genuinely, like, she is, she's so funny, and again, just like, I think it's just there's like a sort of simple sincerity to everything that she sort of says that just makes her like so hilarious. Because like, again, like her world is like so small, but again, it's just so brilliant because of it. No, she's definitely like an absolute favorite as well. I think one thing I'd say against the show is, just since we're on the sort of topic of characters, is actually, and especially coming off of the first episode, I was kind of disappointed at their use of James. Like sometimes, I like the character and stuff, and the character very much just kind of exists to be a punching bag, and that just feels very, very appropriate,
Yep.
and it gets me like most of the time. But I just think like the first episode does a really good job of, it's not much that he's got to do, but the whole thing about him like obviously being at like an all girls school and just needing to go to the bathroom.
And there's no toilet, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not much, but there's just like something going on with his character. What it does feel like most episodes, he's just there and kind of invisible, and every now and again we'll either get a line or get a line thrown at him. And I just wish they did a bit more with it, because I genuinely thought watching the first episode, I was like, a boy going to an all girls school itself is a really good premise for just like a comedy show.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought they would do a bit more with it than they do. So I do think that's like one of the show's flaws, is I do think they could have done a bit more in terms of like giving his character something to do. But I do think he also like fits the dynamic.
Yeah.
Another one I really like is Sister Michael.
I feel like I've got a kind of weird relationship with Sister Michael. I think it potentially could have been because I was binging it, but at one point there was a few episodes where I feel like she was overused.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to the point where I was getting a little bit like, here's Sister Michael kind of rolling her eyes again. And don't get me wrong, I do think she's very funny. And apparently the actress who plays her is like hysterical in real life.
Oh, really?
And I think the fact that she's like obviously like a nun, and she's always like sighing and rolling her eyes and being like, oh Lord above kind of thing, is very funny. And I love her absolute like disdain for children when she's a head teacher, is very funny. But yeah, I do have a bit of a weird relationship with her, to be honest. Right. Back again.
Yes. I know, for the third time. Yeah, so Sister Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, like, a lot of the jokes are very much the same kind of joke that you get with the in-betweeners, but I think, for me, what makes her work is, I like the awareness that she has a lot of the time. Like, I think it's in the first episode of the third series with the exam results, where she deliberately implies that they failed just to wind them up.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. Again, it just feels like a nice sort of slight subversion on, like, the classic sitcom. It was just like a misunderstanding, a mistake. Like, she is deliberately like messing with
that
it.
was a good point. And you're even like the haunting one where when they do that thing that everyone does, oh, if there's anything we can do, and she's like, do you know what? Go to her house. Here's directions to her house. Clean it out for me.
Straight into it. Yeah, and I love, as just that moment really got me, where she rocks up in the DeLorean. And with the sunglasses as well, that like flip up. I was like, that is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I do have a lot of love for the character. Apparently the actress that plays her really, really, really hates the wimple. Like the sort of hat
really?
Thing. Yeah, apparently they really, really struggled in the first series with getting it on, and I don't think they've ever really perfected it. Like, I think in the first series she said that they had to use like staples and nails to get it on. Yeah.
Ooh.
So she can't stand it. Like, that's like the one thing that she has to complain about, because she says otherwise like she absolutely loves working on the show, but just like she's just so fed up of playing a nun.
Do you know what character I absolutely adore, and I can't remember her whole name, but is it Jenny? The kind
Jenny
of
Joyce.
Jenny Joyce. The like overbearing prefect, kind of head girl-esque. Oh, she's hilarious. Like, she's so funny because there was people like that in your school, and it's
absolutely.
That's what makes it so funny. It's painful.
Yeah. even just like the actress herself, just like so perfectly is that like type of person. It is, like that is another one where, I mean, everywhere the casting is perfect, but no, you're right, it's so spot on.
And there's a really funny bit with Sister Michael, actually, when she says, oh, you'll what was it she said, something like, oh, you'll go far in life, but no one will like you.
Yeah.
Very funny and very true.
Yeah, exactly. What's your opinion on the grandfather?
I think I love his constant berating of Jerry. I think it's very funny. Even when Jerry's trying to like stick up for him, like he's just straight in there with the with the quips, but I think he's maybe not the strongest character. I feel like especially when he's in a room with all of the other characters. Do you know what I mean? Like the Sarah and Mary and all the girls and things. Him and Jerry kind of. Jerry's very funny as well. Don't get me wrong, but they're more kind of on the peripheral for me anyway. I feel like they're maybe just not the funniest, and I wonder if that's maybe because it's written by a woman. I wonder if she purposely, if the women are funnier just because that's what she's, if she's used to writing female characters, or that's just her kind of perspective.
It's a good point, actually. Yeah, because I guess like all the sort of least funny characters, I'd say, really are the male ones. I like Jerry, I think, more than I like the grandfather. I think just he gets a lot of like. I like because he gets a lot. I think he gets to react more to things that are going on in the show, in the episodes. The sort of like madness of it all. He's very much the sort of straight man in a lot of the situations, and he does it really well. Whereas I think like it's weird because I think to begin with I didn't really like what they did with the grandfather character, because I thought it just felt very much like I've seen this in a million other sitcoms where it's like. The sort of stepfather doesn't like, he's just there to sort of berate and belittle the father, and that kind of is his only, like, generally that is really all the grandfather ever does. Like that's all of his lines are just like directed with like ire towards Jerry, so I think that's probably what makes him the weakest, whereas Jerry actually gets like, again, he gets to react more to things that are going on.
I'd say Jerry more than the rest of the characters. As a character, he's more like he's a bit quicker than the other ones, and he's very sarcastic, and like you're saying, a lot of that comes from him. The fact that he reacts to everything, as opposed to him kind of being the source of the joke, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's funnier when he reacts to things, because there's a couple of episodes where he is more like the joke, and I don't think it works as well. But I think when he's just reacting to things, it's just really well done, and he gets some really nice he gets some nice sort of like heartfelt moments as well. I think there's a really nice moment in the second series, I think, the concert episodes where he sees them on TV and just doesn't say anything.
And he's just quiet. Yeah,
and it's just a really nice it's like a really understated, really nice moment to sort of end the episode on. So I think there's moments like that again just like give the character a lot of worth. But I was just curious because I initially was a lot more like I guess negatively inclined towards the grandfather, but then like I think again some of the insults he throws at him are also so funny that it's like it's impossible to kind of like sustain that feeling, because I was like, okay, no, there's a lot of like genuine gold, and I think there's like some great uses as well where like it goes against his own interests to basically like turn on Jerry.
Or he's like, Jerry's agreeing with him, and he's like, "How dare you?" Like, very funny. Like in the most recent one where the mums were trying to diet, in the 6 hours they had before the party, and he was like, "I'm not on a diet," and the grandma comes in, and he's like, "Oh, how nice is that? You're not even supporting your wife." And he's away for a fry up.
Yeah, across the roads. Yeah.
I do like as well. He does those really weird like old people things where like the episode where they're gonna go camping, and it's like I can't remember the neighbour's name, but he's like, "That's blah blah blah, second best tent." Like, what? Who has multiple tents that you can rank? Which one's the best?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's again. Again, there's like a human and relatable element to like all of the characters, which is so spot on. Which is terrific.
But I'm definitely excited to, and I'm slightly nervous. I'm not even gonna lie, just about the final kind of episodes, just because it's been so good up until this point, and I feel like there's so much pressure when you're ending something, to make it right, basically, because once that's ended, you can't necessarily go back and, do you know what I mean, do another one. So
exactly.
But no, I'm definitely looking forward to it, and thank you again, Sam. That was really interesting. I'm glad we got to speak about it. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Not your fault.
This was a new technical difficulty though, different to the other ones we've had, so So that's
So new one
always
every week.
exciting. Exactly.
I know. But no, thank you very much for picking Derry Girls. It was a pleasure to watch it.
Yeah,
I will be tuning in for the last episodes. Tearfully so. So it's been a great discussion and a
Yeah.
great watch.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for joining me. And next time we're going to be a new technical issue, I'm sure, but we'll be discussing our kind of conceptual idea next time. And it'll be me again, and then I'll be back onto Sam. So yeah, we shall see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Farewell.
See you later.